Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy here, and I am with my wife's 2012 Honda Odyssey in my new shop. And this might be the first repair video that I'm shooting here, I'm not really sure. I'm going to apologize in advance if this introduction seems a bit long, but I do have a reason for that, and I suggest you watch the whole thing because this is going to be the information that's going to be important to you. Those of you that have been following along with the saga of my wife's 2012 Honda Odyssey may be familiar with the oil leak that was on the front of this engine that I was trying to address. I did a video last year. It is now 2025. I think it was 2024 when I did the video where I replaced the valve cover gaskets, spark plug tube seals, and a few other oil seals, and also did a valve adjustment. And that video will be linked down in the description along with any other videos that I mentioned here now. Also parts, tools, that kind of thing, all linked in the description, so check there if you're looking for additional information. After doing all that valve cover work and everything, I still had an oil leak coming from the area around the right front side of the vehicle. So right around the front where the drive belts and everything are, where the dipstick is probably the best way for you to identify it. So if you've got this oil leak around the dipstick, around one of these engines, you could very well be dealing with this problem. What I found out was the leak was actually coming from the spool valve assembly that works the VCM system on this vehicle. I had attempted, because I'm sure many of you would also try, to just replace the gaskets for that assembly. However, I need to tell you that those gaskets that you purchase, though they say Honda on the outside, though they have, quote unquote good Honda part numbers, you will not be able to purchase those gaskets from a Honda dealer because they are not Honda gaskets. They are kind of counterfeit gaskets. However, they fit pretty good, and I wanted to see if they would seal. I'm making this video now because they did not seal. So if you think you're going to be saving some money by fixing that oil leak with just those gaskets, you may find yourself disappointed as I am. Now, I did go in and I did snug up all the fasteners that hold that spool valve assembly together, and it did tighten up on those gaskets and it did slow the leak down, but it's still there. And I believe the only fix for this leak is the only part that Honda is going to sell you, because they won't sell you those gaskets. The only thing they're going to sell you is this, which is the spool valve assembly. So the entire assembly is what they're going to sell you. And that's what I'm going to be replacing here in this video to hopefully deal with this oil leak once and for all. This oil leak is particularly troublesome because not only is it an oil leak, but it also leaks onto the alternator, which can destroy the alternator. And you might remember from previous videos, and I'll link all this stuff down in the description for you, that I had replaced the alternator on this vehicle already. Here are the tools I used for this job. I had a scraper. I would prefer to use a plastic razor blade. I can link those in the description. You don't need the power tools, but you will need a 10 millimeter, a 12 millimeter, a 14 millimeter, and 5.5 millimeter for the air tube, or a Phillips head screwdriver. Also a flathead screwdriver. I used a couple of T-handles. These are 10 and 12 millimeter. And a body clip removable tool. That was the only other thing I needed, and some Honda bond, now that I'm thinking about it. A pair of pliers. I like the angled pliers. They work well for the clamps that I need to undo. And that is my toolkit for the shop. Before you get too far in, the first thing you should do is remove the dipstick. In fact, when you do your inspection, remove the dipstick. It's so easy to break this plastic end off of here that I just like eliminating the possibility of breaking it at all by just removing it. So remove the dipstick, set it aside till you're done. You may notice that I've raised the front of the vehicle slightly, and I did that because, well, I'm taller, and for me it seems easier to work on things with it up in the air like this. To do this, I just put a floor jack underneath the middle here. There's a tow hook that you can jack the whole front end of the vehicle up, and then I place my jack stands after that. In process of removing the valve cover here, and here's a tip that I think might be helpful to you. If you're going to do any cleaning, which you likely will if you've got this oil leak, do the cleaning before you remove the valve cover or before you remove a bunch of stuff. That will help prevent getting dirt and junk down into the engine as you work. So just clean it up before you take it apart. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of detail about taking things apart all the way down to the valve cover because that is covered in those videos, as I mentioned. So I'm pretty much going to leave that up to you to watch that part of it. But we're going to circle back after we've got things apart, and well, we'll talk about replacing the spool valve, which lives right here. The valve cover has been removed. Well, I should say the intake has been removed so that we could remove the valve cover. Again, this is detailed in that other video that I did about the valve adjustment. Probably the thing that's going to help you the most is there's a bracket right down here that is held to the side of the cylinder head with a 14mm fastener. Looks just like that. Remove that 14mm fastener, this bracket will come loose and give you all kinds of slack in the harness to allow you to move it around, and that's just one fastener that you need to remove in order to accomplish that. I have switched over to cleaner gloves because now I'm working inside the engine, and as I mentioned before, I want to try to keep the inside of this clean. Now, here is the new part, and this helps illustrate the challenge here. These two holes represent the two shafts that are going to be passing through here that hold the rocker arms and everything in place. So they actually go into the unit right over here. So what we're going to need to do, we can't just unbolt this and take it out. We're also going to need to, well, there's two fasteners. There's one there and one down at the bottom. That holds this whole assembly in. There's no gasket. We're going to use Honda Bond for that. But in order to remove it, what we're going to need to do, in addition to the fasteners that hold it down, is we're going to need to remove this whole upper assembly on this rocker thing here. So we're going to have to remove all of these 12mm fasteners in order to get this assembly up out of here. And we're going to need to be very careful because there's a lot of little bits and things that may want to come falling out while we're doing this. Additionally, when you remove the fasteners, start at the outside and then work your way in. And you might even consider just loosening them up a little bit at a time as you go around. And the reason for this is these valves are under spring pressure, some of them are, because the cam lobes are coming around and coming into contact with them. And what that does is it puts pressure on this assembly. So when you're loosening these fasteners, some of these will be under pressure, some of them will not, and it will sort of want to go on, come off uneven. The way I told you how to release things from the outside in is going to be helpful into sort of mitigating any issues with that. Now's the fun part. I think it's all broken loose from the cylinder head, no problem. However, I think the Honda Bond is holding the old, oh, not anymore, solenoid assembly. I'm leaving all of the bolts and everything in, that way they go back to where they are going to go. I also have a piece of cardboard set up on the floor that I'm going to take this entire assembly and rest it down onto. A workbench would be even better, but I don't have one of those set up at the moment. But the idea is to have a clean surface ready to receive this once you've removed it. Probably not a bad idea to like pull each one of these out and up to make sure that they are no longer threaded in to the cylinder head before you remove it. And the truth of the matter is you don't have to remove this entire assembly in order to do this repair. You can just actually at this point probably take the end off. But I'm taking this whole thing out of here, trying to keep it all together because this will slide off of here. Come on. All right. Now it's mine. Here's what it looks like naked without the rocker shaft assembly in there. If I'm not mistaken, I almost think that there was a TSB or something about a noisy top end after the engine got warmed, and it had to do with these rocker shafts that I'm messing with right now. All right, just to give you an idea of what you're looking at here. These are the valves, in particular these are the intake valves because they're close to the intake, and the exhaust valves are the ones down at the bottom there that are close to the exhaust manifold. These are the cam lobes. Well, this is the cam that runs through the center of this. And these cam lobes, this center one, I'm not sure which is which, but one of these cam lobes just opens the intake, and then the other opens the exhaust. So the other two open the exhaust, and that's where you do your valve adjustment. In fact, after doing this, you might want to do a valve adjustment, and as it happens, I just have a video on that, so you can watch that as well. But now that this is out, let's change over the solenoid assembly. Actually, before we do, I'm going to come in here with a plastic razor blade. I've recently discovered these. So I have plastic razor blades that I'm going to use to remove all of the old Honda Bond from this machine surface. Guess who couldn't find their plastic razor blades? They're around here somewhere. Anyway, you can use a regular razor blade. Just be super careful not to scratch the surface of the cylinder head. And when you do scrape out, not in towards the engine, but I'm in here very carefully trying to remove, like I said, this Honda Bond that is around this area. Now I believe also it looks like this bolt hole here has some Honda Bond on it, and that's an indication that there's probably Honda Bond going on that fastener, so be mindful of that. I believe I've managed to get the surface acceptably clean and ready for the new part. Here's the assembly over on my cardboard. And I think I mentioned that I wanted to do the same thing as far as cleaning over here goes, but I think we can very easily just slide this guy off of those shafts and set it aside because he's no longer needed there. But what we can do, if we're careful, and I'm most concerned about these springs here, is turn it over so that you can get a look at it. I knew that was going to happen. But I also wanted to clean these mating surfaces, get any oil or gook off of them. And these rollers, it's a roller cam, believe it or not. These rollers are what rides on the camshaft. So that's why it's called a roller cam. And then these here are what make contact with the top of the valves. So this is in contact with the camshaft. And every time the lobe comes around, it will depress the valve. If you need to make a valve adjustment, you're basically adjusting this stop here or this piece here to make contact at exactly the right point on the back of the valve. So that gives you some insight into how this works. And on this other side, you can see these are a little bit different. They're attached as one assembly. So this one lobe activates both valves simultaneously, whereas these have separate rocker arms for each valve. And the difference is one of these, this one here, is part of the VCM system, so this rocker system is different. This is designed to be disabled when the VCM system is activated so that this cylinder basically acts like an air spring instead of a contributing member of the engine. And when it does that, it deactivates the rocker arms so they don't open and close the valves. So it's got little bits that come into here that lock these together that leave them deactivated so the cam can still rotate, but it won't be activating the valves. But I think we're pretty well clean there now. So we'll bring this back around. And I'm fairly certain all these fasteners are the same length. So far that's proving to be true. At least the three that fell out are the same length. With my new assembly, there's a couple of things I want to do. We want to make sure that we coat the Honda Bond on the bottom of our new part so that it seals properly. And you'll see that there's sort of a crosshatch surface, and that's the only place that you need to add the Honda Bond. Nothing in here. It's just in this area. But also, before I go and install this onto the rocker shaft assembly, I'm just going to take a little bit of engine oil and I'm going to put it in these holes. But first, before I do that, I'm going to add the Honda Bond and get that all ready. Now I've taken up a different approach with Honda Bond, and I don't know how well it's working, but in the past I've reused the caps, and well, with mixed results. I end up having to dig out the end of whatever's in here because it hardens up in order to use it again, because it's usually a period of time between uses of Honda Bond. But what I've started to do is just leave a glob of stuff on the end of the tube like that. Just leave that glob there. And I'm going to pull it off and hope that underneath is some fresh Honda Bond that's ready to come out. So far I didn't feel that. Still feels like I'm going to have to dig some stuff out with a screwdriver. So far I'm having to dig down deeper than I normally would if the cap is on. So ignore this method. Go back to the putting the cap on and digging stuff out that way. Okay, so if you don't want to ruin your $8 tube of Honda Bond, don't do what I did. Hey, you know what? I'm not using Honda Bond because this is my last tube and it's not working out so great. I actually have what I feel may be a better solution. This is an anaerobic sealer, and it is designed to cure with the absence of oxygen. But what I find with machine surfaces is the cleanup when using this stuff is so much easier because it basically wipes off. So it seals when it needs to seal, but it wipes off later. So anytime I'm dealing with machine surfaces like we are here, I like to use this when I can, although Honda Bond is what this is calling for, and I will need Honda Bond when I reinstall the valve cover gasket. However, it doesn't look like I have a lot of Honda Bond to choose from, So here we are using this for now. That should net me what I need in order to seal it. Another thing about this sealer is that it can sit like this for a while. It's not going to cure again until there's the absence of oxygen. So as long as it's got oxygen, it's not going to cure. Now I'm going to take some oil, just regular engine oil, and just squirt it down inside these openings, just to get a start on things. But aside from the two fasteners, these guys, same size, doesn't matter. Now let's see if we can get it back down in there. The most important thing is making sure that all of our rocker arms and everything are lined up. We don't want to start running down fasteners or anything until we're sure that everything is in there nicely. So again, you want to be mindful of everything. Like everything as you're assembling. Like just make sure that everything's fitting together, that dowel pins are being engaged. I'm just going to start the fasteners and use them sort of like guide pins. So these will help direct me where this needs to go. And if the fasteners are spinning easily, you did it right. If they're spinning tight, you might not be in alignment. You might need to redo it. It feels like it's headed in the right direction. I'm going to go grab the fasteners for here. And I'm also going to add some more of that sealer to the threads of these fasteners. So the fasteners that hold the spool valve to the cylinder head, I'd put some Honda Bond on those threads. And again, I'm going to tighten from the center out. We're just going to run these down to where they make contact. Now I'm just going to walk these around by hand. The final torque is going to be 21 pound-feet. I believe you can start at 18. But as I mentioned earlier, there's going to be spring tension on some of these rockers. So you'll be working against that as you're running it down, but it's going to be uneven. So what you need to try to do is make it even by going in this pattern that I'm showing you. But you want to avoid the cracking, popping noises. So just a little bit at a time everywhere. Don't crank any one fastener all the way down. When you're getting down to the point where you're just making like little half turns like this, it's probably time to start torquing. So make absolutely certain that all your rockers are in alignment with the valves. If they're not, fix it. I believe the procedure is 18 pound-feet and then 21 pound-feet. And I believe that's also for these spool valve connections as well. Got the torque wrench set for 18 pound-feet. And again, center, work your way out. You're kind of in the way there. And when you do the torque wrench, try to do like I'm trying to do here and do a nice sweep and try to get it towards the end. And this is why I think doing this in 2 steps is going to be helpful. There's a lot of obstructions and stuff sticking up around here. And if you hit that with your wrench just before you're about to reach the torque, that'll mess you up. So you want to be sure to try to get a nice clean beep, like every time you do it, instead of like a click, 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 beep, click, 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 beep, and try to get it in. That's torque to 18 foot-pounds. Going for a final torque of 21 pound-feet. I'm just going to go around and check them all once. They're all torqued. Everything seems in place. I just did the valve adjustment. I'm going to roll with what I had, but again, if you're doing this, you might consider a valve adjustment. Video linked in the description. That is as much Honda bond as you want to use in the places that you want to use it. The only place that it's necessary is down in these corners. And you only need a small amount, like a very small amount is all you need. At this point, you're just reversing what you did. But the hardest part is probably going to be fishing this down in here. Which I'm going to be careful of two things. Knocking the gasket out of the valve cover and wiping off too much Honda bond. Once you find the spark plug wells, you've kind of got it. The torque on these is going to be 6.7 foot-pounds. I admit I'm not using my torque wrench here. I'm just snugging them up. And honestly, I'm just going until they stop and bottom out, because the bolt is only so long. So in other words, you can't tighten the valve cover down anymore past a certain point. So once they bottom out, it's just really a question of All right, I didn't give you detail on the disassembly because, as I said, I've got another video on that. Same is going to be true for reassembly, but we'll stop back in and start it up and check for leaks. Everything's all assembled and hopefully plugged in. Let's start it up and look for check engine lights. Ah, giant vacuum leak. Fix that. So listen for hissing noises. If you hear a big one, look for a vacuum leak. That's why I left the engine cover off. But given that it's running quietly and I don't observe any leaks here, which I'll come back before the end of the video in like a couple of days or whatever, or a day or whatever, just to see if we've solved that problem. But so far, it's looking good. So here we are about 24 hours after the repair, and as you can see, there's no leaks. I hope that trend continues. Now back to you, Eric. I believe this is your fix if you have an oil leak coming from the spool valve on the front of your J-Series engine. If I'm wrong, but I have tried to reseal it with gaskets, no success. Those videos will be linked down in the description for more detailed information. I'll also link parts, tools, anything else down in the description to make it easy for you to find. If you have automotive questions not covered in this video, I ask that you head over to EricTheCarGuy.com. That will also be linked in the description, so check the description for additional information. I want to thank you so much for watching today. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty. I'll see you next time.